Hello. In this video, we will learn how to make exploded views in Creo Parametric. Previously, we've learned how to assemble individual parts into assemblies. This is one of the assemblies that we've made previously, and this happens to be an assembly which is movable. It's a mechanism, and we have a slider connection over here, a cylindrical connection actually, and a gear connection over here. The assembly doesn't need to be movable for us to make exploded views. This is just something that we've made previously, so I'm continuing to work on this. What are exploded views? As the name suggests, exploded views are representations of your models. They could be 3D models or 2D drawings in which individual components are exploded from the overall assembly, and they're shown separately, and that gives you an idea of the anatomy of a complex assembly. Over here, it's a relatively simple assembly, so it's not difficult to discern what the different components are. We have a back plate, then we have a gear, which is a component, another gear, which is a component. This shaft could have been a separate component, but in this case, it's a part of the back plate. So we can get a pretty decent idea of what is making up this assembly. But imagine a drill machine. It's not obvious what goes into a drill machine. And if you want to convey the construction of your drill machine to a user or a manufacturer or an investor, it is a useful it's useful to use exploded views. I have opened a few tabs over here of examples of what an exploded view might look like. So continuing the example of a drill machine, all the components have been shown separately in this view, and this not only tells you what are the different components, it also gives you a general idea of how those components are assembled based on where they're arranged. This, which looks like a motor, and this impeller and all of these other components, they probably would be assembled along the same axis, and then this sub-assembly would mount somewhere in the central portion of the drill. These components would again be coaxial. They might be a part of this sub-assembly, or they might be a different sub-assembly, but overall we can get a gist of how various components are assembled in a sub-assembly. If you want to provide more details about how to assemble things, you can add connection lines, which will tell you how to assemble things together, and we'll look at that as we start making exploded views. Here's an example of a pedestal fan which has been exploded, and this clearly conveys what a fan is made of. And if you are a user of this fan and you bought a disassembled fan, just by looking at this exploded view, you can get an idea of how to put things together. This is a 3D model generated exploded view of an IC engine. You can see individual components here, the engine block, the connecting rods. You can't see the crankshaft, that should be somewhere over here. The sprockets, the pistons, the cylinder head, valves. So exploded views are very useful, and today we learn how to generate exploded views for our assemblies in Creo. If you go to View in Creo, you have this tool which is known as the View Manager. Click on this, and this opens up a menu of different types of views that you have. There is a tab for exploded views. We'll look at that in a minute. But before we do that, let's look at this Orient tab. When you open Orient tab, you'll see something similar. I'm just trying to remove a few things which I made previously, which you probably won't be able to see. So if you in the Orient tab, Orient, I think over here is short for orientation. It shows you different default or standard orientations which you have for your model. So the default orientation that Creo considers your default with respect to the reference planes is this. The back orientation is this orthogonal view. This is the bottom view, front view. There are some standard orientations. You have access to these. And if you want to save a particular view at a particular angle that you find useful, it shows you the parts of the design that you want to highlight, then you can make a new view yourself. Position the part, position the assembly in the orientation that you want. This looks good to me. And then make a new orientation view. Give it a name. I'll call it view gears because this is focused on the gears. I'll press the center mouse button, and now when I move things around and I want to look at the gears again, sorry, I'll double click on view gears and it takes me to that view. Similarly, let's generate a view that focuses on the piston. I'll position it as such, make a new view, call it view piston, press enter, and that has been saved. So if I go to my top view, my left view, like I'm just trying to find a view where I can't see the piston. Let's just go over here. And then I want to see my piston. I'll just select view piston and it takes me to that orientation. This is a very useful tool. Do play around with this, explore this, and we'll be using this during our exploded view portion of discussion as well. Okay, so before we customize our exploded views, there is a default exploded view that already exists for each assembly. So if this is our assembly, like I'll just focus on the gears for now, and within the view tab, you'll see that there is the exploded view command. If you click this command, it quote unquote explodes things. Not much happened on the gears over here. They just rotated. Not what I would have wanted. I would have wanted them to separate from the base assembly so that I can clearly show what are the components. The piston did move, so that is more acceptable. But normally the default exploded view is not one that will meet your needs. So press the exploded view button again and this unexplodes things and brings it back to its default orientation. So instead of using the default exploded view, it's always better to define your own exploded view. For that, we'll go to the view manager again and we'll go to explode. You can activate the default exploded view from here as well. This time it acted differently. That's strange. And that's much better, surprising. Okay, but still, we want to explode things differently. So let's make our own exploded view. Go to explode and make a new exploded view. I'll call it my exploded view. Press enter, and now right click it and edit positions. When you edit position, you'll place different parts of your assembly to where you want them to be once things are exploded. Within the edit position menu, you can select individual parts and move them around. So I'll select this gear, and once I select this gear, I'm given 3 options. Do I want to translate it along this axis or one of the other 2 axes? If you want to rotate it, which I don't, you can go to the rotate option from here, but for now I'll stick to translate. And what I want to do is to translate my gear along this axis. Before I do that, I'll select the increment in which I want this to be translated. So I'm working in inches, so I want it to be translated in steps of 0.5 inches. And now when I select this arrow, it moves in steps, and each step is 0.5 inches. you don't need to use that. If you left that increment duration to 0, then it would move continuously. But if you want to be in control over how much you've moved your part, that's helpful. So I'll move it by what I think are 8 steps. The first thing I did was move this gear. Now I'll do the same for the second gear. I'll increment in the point of 0.5 and I'll try to move it 8 steps. Yes. Just to distinguish it, I'll move it another 0.5 inches. I'll go over here and I'll move my piston down. It's not obvious over here, but the steps in which you explode your view later on will be replicated when we're trying to generate an animation of the exploded event. So just keep in mind what we are doing, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not arbitrarily moving things around. You're welcome to play with that, but what I'm doing is that I'm moving this piston down and then up a little. It will become clear why I did that, and this is the final position that I want. So that's a pretty good exploded view. It separates out all the parts and allows me to see all of the components. Another thing that I can do is I can add connection lines. They're over here called cosmetic offset lines, and these are lines that can help us understand where individual parts were disassembled from, how were they exploded. So if I want the viewer to be able to directly understand that this gear was removed from this shaft, I'll select an axis over here on the gear, an axis on the shaft, click apply, and this dashed line is generated between the two parts. And this is meant to convey that if you want to reassemble this assembly, slide this gear back. You could do the same for this gear as well. And this way you can have these connection lines that help us understand how an assembly was disassembled. I'm happy with this exploded view. I'll click OK. One thing important to do is that make sure that you don't have a plus sign over here in the view manager for your new exploded view. This plus sign means that this exploded view has not been saved. You right click over here and make sure that your new view that you just defined is saved. I've saved that, and now when I explode and unexplode, this view is used, and this view is something that meets my requirements. You're not very complicated, but very useful. Do play around with exploded views. If you have your view exploded as you want and you want to take a picture, orient things, we learn about how to render images, which allows you to generate high resolution photorealistic images later. But for now, you know how to generate, how to save JPEGs, PNGs, or PDFs, and this is useful. We've learned about annotations previously, so you can still use annotations over here. You might not be able to annotate features in the exploded view. You'll have to annotate them while the features are, while the view is unexploded, but you could add notes. There is an option somewhere over here of notes. I'm working on a very small screen, so can't see all the tabs. So yeah, this is a note. You can select a plane that you want to work on, and you can write a note over here. I'll call it gear side. This is written in the opposite direction. I can select this text over here and reverse its direction from here. There should be a command. This command, I don't know why it's okay, this command over here that should flip things. So this is the right orientation. Similarly, you can add a note over here. All right, so that's how you can make exploded views. Now let's unexplode our view, and we learn how can we make an animation in which we make our view explode, and then if you want unexplode and change the orientation of things while we're making that video. For that, we'll go to applications. Similarly to how we started mechanism, which is an application within Creo, we'll start animation, which is a separate application. I think this is an old animation that I had made, so I'll delete that. What you should see is something like this. How you define animations in Creo is through a series of frame sequences. So we'll define multiple frames that at time 0 we want to be showing this frame. Then at time 10 we want to show a different frame. And then Creo stitches all of those together in a continuous manner where the transitions are smooth, and then turns it into an animation. So we'll start by defining our frame sequences. You can give your animation a name. I'll call it my animation. And first, you have to define what happens at time 0. At time 0, I want it to have my default unexploded view. That looks good. I'll add this. Then 10 seconds after this, I want it to show this exploded view, which we named my explode. 10 seconds after that, and another 10 seconds after that, I want it to unexplode again. So it should follow this sequence: start unexploded, explode as per the specifications of my exploded view, and then unexplode again. And I want it to follow the sequence in which I exploded things. I exploded this gear first, then this gear, then the piston. So to enable that, I'll select this box over here, which says follow explode sequence. I want the translation to be linear. So I'll keep the default settings over there. I'll click OK over here, and now over here our keyframe sequences have been set up. But one thing that you see, that it's only showing us 10 seconds, while our animation is going to be 30 seconds or 20 seconds long. So we'll right click over here and edit our time domain, and increase the end time to 25 seconds. Now it is showing us our animation, and these 3 triangles signify the 3 frame sequences. Over here you'll have an unexploded view, then your exploded view that you defined, and then your unexploded view over here again. So if we play it, by this time things have exploded, and then after that they start unexploding. So this was a bit fast. So if I click playback over here, we can play the animation in its own video where we can control its speed, and you can see what's happening. Things explode one by one in the sequence that we defined. First the gears exploded, then the piston exploded, and then they start unexploding, because that's what we've added. That's what we've asked for. I'll stop this. I'll close this for now. I'll save what I've done. And another thing that I want to do now is I want to define another exploded view. Or in fact, what I'll do is that I'll modify the exploded view that I have and then define another exploded view. So I'll go to my manage views. I'll keep this exploded view as is, and I'll define a new exploded view. In which I'll focus on the piston. In fact, I'll define 2 new exploded views. I'll delete this. In the first exploded view, I'll explode the gears. I'll call this exploded view gear explode. I'll edit the position over here of the two gears. I'll bring this gear out first, then this gear out. And you can move both the gears or multiple components together as well while by selecting them together. And now if I move these in any direction, both of them will move. I'm happy with this exploded view. I'll save this. And now I'll define a new exploded view, which I'll call piston explode. Center mouse button. I'll edit the definition over here. What I want to do is to take the piston down and then maybe bring it up, with this being the final position. I click OK, save, and now I have two exploded views. There is a reason why I wanted two exploded views, which will become clear as we go back to our animation. And I'll delete this animation which I previously created. I'll start a new animation in the keyframe sequence. I'll start with an unexploded view. So I'll add an unexploded view. At 10 seconds, I want to have the gear explode be implemented at 10 seconds. I'll add that view. At 15 seconds, I want things to unexplode again. Then at 25 seconds, I want the piston explode view to activate, in which the piston is separated, and then I'll unexplode things again at 35 seconds. And just to make it 50, I'll have the piston explode again, ending at 50 seconds. Okay, so I've added a whole bunch of sequences where I'm using the different exploded and unexploded views that we have created. And I wanted to follow the explode sequence that I've defined. I'll click OK. And now if I play, it should follow that sequence. It stopped at 10 seconds because we did not edit the time domain. So we want the time domain to go on till 50 seconds. So the gears explode, they unexplode, the piston explodes, it unexplodes, then it explodes again. So a whole lot of things are happening, but that's exactly what I wanted to illustrate, that you could have multiple exploded views. But one thing that you might have seen is that it was difficult to focus on one thing. To help with that, what we can do is that we can tell Creo that while the gears are exploding, I want you to show me this view, and while the piston is exploding, I want you to show me this view. And we can do that by using this command, view at different times. So when you select this, a similar menu appears where at different times you need to define different views. At the starting time, I want it to have this is the time, and these are the different views. Previously, we defined two views, one focused on the gears and one focused on the piston. So initially, I'll have this view where we're looking at the gears. I'll apply that. Then around 12 seconds, I wanted to start looking at the piston. So I'll tell it that at 12 seconds, give me this view. And then at some point, you might tell it to show you things from the side. So at 25 seconds, you might tell it to show you things from the left. And then at 35 seconds, go back to the piston view. So now if we play thing, so now you'll see two parallel sequences. One tells you the keyframes and the second tells you the positions. If you wanted to go back and modify anything about the keyframes, about the frames that you have, you can right click over here and edit your keyframe sequence and add more frames, remove frames here, or change the timing of the frames. Now when I click play, it starts with the view focused on the gears and then pivots to a view focused on the piston, shows me things from the left, and then goes back to the view of the piston. I'm not saying that this is useful, but if you think about what you want to focus on, these are the tools that you can use to make an animation that illustrates what you want to highlight. One last thing that I want to show is this tool where you can change the transparency of different objects at different moments in time. So what I want to do is that while things are focused on the piston and the piston is reciprocating, I want the transparency of the cylinder to be increased. I don't want it to be completely opaque. I want it to be translucent. So what I'll do is that I'll tell Creo that at 20 seconds, make this part, which I just selected, make this translucent, and I'll select its opacity by changing things from here. So what you have to do is that you have to tell Creo at what time do you want to change the transparency and of which part. Select the part and then choose a transparency value. I've selected that. I'll tell it to revert back to a more opaque view at 40 seconds. I'll select the same part again and I'll click OK over here, and I'll tell it to be only 10% transparent. Apply, and I don't want to add any more transparency settings. Over here you can see that you are going to make things more transparent over here. This is the first transparency setting that you applied, and you'll revert to a more opaque setting over here. Now when I click play, every time you play a new animation, it asks for confirmation and asks you if it's okay to overwrite previous plays. So it's changing the orientation, and once we arrive at this point, it also changes the transparency of parts. So this will be very useful for your gearbox assignment. I'm expecting that you'll smartly and aesthetically use different angles, different orientations, different transparency settings, different ways of exploding things, and make a very illustrative, easy to understand animation. Once you are happy with your animation, play it. Once you have played an animation, it is loaded in your playback tool. If you don't play an animation and open this playback tool, nothing will show up. So after you've played it, open this playback tool, select this play current result set. And over here, you can, if you want, play things to make sure that they are what you want. You can change the playback speed. Yeah, I'm generally happy. And then you can save this. So when you hit save, it asks you for a name of the file that you want to save. You can save it as an MPEG, or I prefer AVI. It's slightly better quality. And then select the resolution. I'll select 1920 by 1368, which in my case is the highest resolution. I'll select 50 frames per second, which for a video of 50 seconds should give me an actual video of 10 seconds. I'm not selecting render frames, but if you want very high quality images, do select that, but that will take more computational power and slow things down. And if you don't have a very powerful laptop, it might even crash your laptop, but worth playing around with. I click OK. It will go through the sequence, start to play an animation, and it will save a video. This might take a while depending on how long your animation is, what resolution you've selected, and of course the computational power of your computer. All right, so now if you go to your working directory, you should have an animation which is saved. A new animation was just generated, and you can play this and use this for your communication. All right, so this is how you can make exploded views in Creo, save different orientations to access those orientations, and then make animations with the exploded views and the orientation views that you have, and modify the settings of when things explode, how they explode, and what the transparency levels are. Thank you.